If you are interested in cybersecurity and would like to learn about someone that spent their career in emerging technologies and now owns a cybersecurity company, then you're in the right spot. Join me with my next guest on the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast, Mark Williams, owner of Quigley Cyber. Let's go.
Hi folks, welcome to the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast by Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter. In this podcast, Gary shares everything about servant leadership, service leadership, authentic leadership, how to create high performance cultures, service excellence and life balance. Here's your host, Gary Ryan.
Thank you, Sienna, for your lovely introduction. We always appreciate your work. So folks, as you know, we've got Mark Williams here. Welcome, Mark. How are you doing?
Very good, Gary. Thanks very much for having me on your podcast.
I really appreciate your time. So cybersecurity, it's topical at the moment. What can you tell folks about Quigley Cyber?
Yeah, sure. So Quigley Cyber addresses a range of segments in the market by providing different services. So for larger organisations such as universities, listed or larger private companies, we provide cybersecurity consultants on a contingent labour basis, which basically means on a day rate. So those resources would often be brought in to support the delivery of a specific cybersecurity project or program of works. And then we also provide recruitment services for permanent cybersecurity resourcing staff. For smaller businesses that don't have a dedicated cybersecurity team, we provide specific cybersecurity services. A complete engagement could start with conducting an assessment to determine gaps in a company's technology security, and then we'd work with stakeholders in the organisation to identify what level of security they wanted to obtain, and then develop a roadmap to achieve that from there, and then we can implement that roadmap. So we can deliver all of that or any element.
So it's got you've got that full suite down this end, or you've got just clear elements down there, and you've got that assessment in the middle that can actually help folk work out where they want to go. What might be, for the uneducated, without getting too technical, what might be a fairly common gap that maybe the smaller businesses have, and then maybe a similar gap that the larger enterprises have that you tend to work in closing for them, Mark?
Look, honestly, Gary, there's gaps everywhere. And it's quite horrifying when you do that assessment. A lot of the larger organisations are aware of the gaps that they've got, and to address them is actually quite challenging. So, we've worked with one of the larger universities in Australia and in helping them do a very large cybersecurity transformation. They were aware from the start what sort of issues that they had within their organisation, but they're just so large to overcome, and they involve lots of legacy technologies. They're huge, and they need budget to address them. Fortunately, in that case, they had budget, so that was good. For the smaller organisations, a lot of the issues relate to good old password management, Pat 123 and your child's name or your birth date, or you can rattle them off. They're classic textbook passwords, and people are still using them. So it's just the simplest issue when it comes to security. And there's a lot of others that are similarly basic, but yeah, that's one of the big ones, and perhaps we can come back to that later.
Given we're there, what might be 1, 2, or 3 basic tips that people should be doing about their passwords that is something practical that they can do? And equally, if you've found the mindset block that stops people from actually doing these things and how to unlock that would be handy to know as well.
Yeah, look, it's such a big issue. As I said, passwords are such a big issue, so I'll go into a bit more detail there. Some people think they've got a system, and they think, I'm genius, I've come up with this system. And with respect to those people, if you've got a system, then the bad guys can figure that system out very easily. The reality is we've all been breached. All of our data is sprayed all over the internet and the dark web by various breaches that we've been a part of. Now, they might not have been the Medibank or the Optus or the big ones, but you might have set up an account for a little bookshop or a clothing outlet years gone by, set up a quick little account so you could order some stuff online. They're probably not the most secure of environments, and that's probably been breached. And so your information's then being taken. And that's happened multiple times. Set up, you might have submitted to win a prize, from some organisation, could be a charity, could be whatever, could be, I got one last week from a football club. Now, I'm not saying that they've got any cybersecurity issues, hope not, but I actually didn't respond to that because they wanted all sorts of personal information. And I don't know where that information is going to go, because often it's sold to organisations, but B, who's going to pinch it along the way. And as I said, it gets sold on and on and on, so it might be secure, but their marketing agency is going to take that information. They're going to possibly then sell it to someone who's going to sell it to someone else, and that data gets aggregated. Now, is that secure? I don't know. So long and the short of it is, your information's everywhere. So you really need to be using a password manager to secure yourself. There's a lot of good ones out there. I use 1Password. That's one of the ones that's had, funnily enough, least security issues. The password managers themselves have security problems. Obviously, they're high value targets, so they're being hit the whole time. So you've really got to expect that your data's been stolen already, and then you've got to take steps to reduce as much as possible the damage that can be caused. One of the other things that people need to do is make sure that they, wherever possible, use multifactor authentication. So you're not just relying on your password, but you've got an authenticator app, ideally on your potentially using an SMS, but the app's a better idea. And back up your data, old school backup. These aren't new concepts, but people still are hesitant or reticent to do it. And I'd really just say trust no one. And it's kind of a cybersecurity issue, but it's just an old school con. Like there's so many, and a family member of mine got conned through a phone call, multiple phone calls. Someone's builds up the trust, because they've got a bit of information about you that, as I said, it's all out there. But they ring up and say, oh, g'day, hi, Mark Williams. How are you? I'm just calling from whatever bank. I see that you've got an account with us, just verifying that your date of birth is XYZ and that you live at this address. They've got that information. So it all sounds very legit. And before you know it, they've asked you to transfer $1,000, $2,000, $10,000, $50,000 into a different bank account, because your account's been compromised, is what they'll say, and they don't have the power to manage that, and for security reasons you have to do it. So all of a sudden you've transferred your cash over, and it's happening so frequently. It's horrifying. So you read in the media regularly about, you read about the bigger ones. Some poor old dear's lost her life savings. I read yesterday Rod Quantock, the comedian from back in the day, lost $30,000 recently through a scam like that. So there's a lot of those big ones, but then there's lots of people losing $1,000 here or there, which hurts everyone. So I'd come back and I'd just say trust no one. The old X-Files line there, just you can't trust anyone. If someone rings up and says they're from wherever they're from, don't believe them, because the banks aren't really ringing you up. I've never had a call from a bank, so just don't trust them.
And look, cybersecurity's topical at the moment in terms of a global meltdown that occurred over the weekend, and the challenge with that is that can make people even more nervous to go down the path to take the small actions that you were just saying that Quigley Cyber, for example, can provide. So any commentary about that? I know it's we don't have to go into the technical details, but maybe on one hand, though, Mark, it's actually an opportunity for people to actually raise their awareness and say, hey, look, how secure is my systems? Maybe this is a little tap on the shoulder, even if I wasn't touched last weekend by what happened last Friday and over the weekend with the Microsoft 365 issue, but maybe it's a nice little tap on the shoulder to say, hey, let's take some action in this space.
Yeah, good points there, Gary. I think hopefully it is a wake-up call, because we've seen, even though it wasn't a cybersecurity issue as such, it was actually a complete own goal by a cybersecurity organisation that are meant to be protecting everyone, and obviously they really stuffed up. So it's one of those things. Yes, this is a rare incident that occurred where the good guys, and I like to phrase it as there's the good guys and there's the bad guys. We're the good guys, by the way. And the good guys stuffed up, but in general, 99.9999% of the time, they're doing their best to protect you. And CrowdStrike, which is the organisation here, they're a reputable company. They're one of many in the sector. They're one of the big ones. I think the president's actually an Australian guy, so maybe they get a bit of extra cred for that. Maybe that helps balance things out a little. But yeah, look, it was just one of those freak incidents that obviously had a massive impact globally. I read this morning that Delta Airlines are still struggling to get planes in the sky as a result, and that's, what's that, 4 days later. But hopefully it is a bit of a wake-up call to companies to think about what are our single points of failure. How effective might we be? Because if that had been one of the bad guys that had put out that sort of, well, in this case it was a patch, and maybe that's possible that they could have in slightly different circumstances. If they'd put it out, they wouldn't have been immediately cooperating with the industry and sharing information to set it right. They would be sitting back and twiddling their thumbs and, yeah, show me the money. Exactly. It could have been a lot worse if that had been perpetrated by some of the bad guys.
Yeah, and I guess to be clear, that single point of failure caused an operational failure for computers, but it wasn't a data breach failure. It was triggered by a cybersecurity company. It wasn't a data breach problem where now people is at risk from a data point of view. It's just a system failure. Now, I use the word just loosely because it was a pretty significant, as you say, Delta Airlines are still struggling for their planes, which is a pretty significant issue. Mental note, not catching Delta at the moment, but they are two different types of problems. But I guess the point that you're highlighting is that single point of failure, and cybersecurity from a data protection point of view is a single point of failure that people need to be looking after. But as you said before, because it's trust nobody, I'm assuming, a lot of the lists, when people go and buy something, and it basically, to even get through the shopping cart, you have to check the box that says, I accept third-party organizations will receive my data. You literally can't go through the checkout unless you check that box. I guess what I'm hearing you say is maybe think twice about doing your purchases that way when that's set up like that.
Look, it is really hard, with everything being so completely digital these days. And therefore, I'd go back to what I said earlier. Your data's out there. If you can avoid spraying more of it out there, then do. Really, you've got to expect that it's out there. So you've got to take all those other steps with your password management, your multi-factor authentication, and so on. As an individual and as a business, there's similar practices that need to be adopted. Obviously, much more complex. We did an assessment of a mid-sized company recently, about 500 staff or so. And when we listed all of the gaps, I think we came up with close to 50 gaps in their security, which isn't uncommon, and they weren't all, really, really significant, but they were gaps nonetheless. And so what organisations like Quigly do is go in and identify the gaps and then say, all right, well, we will rate them in order of the priority that we see. And then we can sort of discuss that with you guys, because you know your business better than we do. So you might be comfortable with a little bit of exposure in this area because it's not going to be devastating to the organisation, whereas there might be, your top 10 that we really need to get on. We really need to get projects funded to address those.
Yeah. So I assume that time frame for that business assessment varies on whether it's a small business to, you mentioned medium at 500 people, to obviously the really large ones. And as a result, I guess you probably can't say there's a typical time frame. Maybe there is for each of those three categories. But let's say a smaller business, how long would it normally take you once you've got the green light to go and at least assess them to be able to come back with a report with that priority list, Mark?
Yeah, look, as you identified, it's a bit of a how long's a piece of string question. It does depend on the complexity of the systems, how many users and so on, and also how much time we can get with the company because and the individuals within it, because we need the information. They've got their usual business operations to attend to. But a smaller business, just for that initial assessment could be depending on how small, and then the larger organisations, depending on just for one system, it could take a couple of years to assess what the gaps are and how they can be addressed. Because
Yeah.
you need to do a lot of business analysis, and when you're talking, let's say 40,000 users on a network, you've got lots and lots of different departments and teams, and you've really got to drill down and understand the nature of the use, the assets that are on the system, the value of those assets, all of that sort of thing.
So the smaller companies, fairly quick turnaround, really, to be able to identify some gaps, which is handy for them to know, because I suspect a lot of small business owners are going, oh, this would be a beast and it's going to take forever. And what you're really saying is probably for them, it's actually relatively quick sort of problem identification. If you've got 5 people or less or 20 people or less, it's not that many for you to have to go and work out what they're touching. So that will vary a little bit. But down the other end, when you're literally talking thousands, lots of departments, big structure, probably spread all over the country, if not internationally, then that's clearly is going to take time. I'm hearing you say, though, along the way, certain things pop up that you're able to identify that might need more, you're able to take the executive and say, hey, this has already popped up. We haven't finished everything, but you probably want to think about setting aside some funds to close this gap along the way. Is that pretty much accurate?
Yeah, pretty much. And look, for the smaller organisations, let's say it's a Microsoft shop, we'll know. Look, these are some of the sort of the template setups that most organisations have, and that's not necessarily the most secure way to do it. So they're the ones that we'll immediately be able to identify and say, hey, look, even while we're going through that assessment process, say, hey, look, this should be tweaked. You're happy for us just to do that on the fly, because these are known issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah, awesome. Now, I always love to ask entrepreneurs why they called their company the name they call it. So, because there's always a story. So, what's the story behind Quigly?
I'm going to disappoint you here, Gary, because it's really not that exciting. I should make up an exciting story. I'm not that creative, though. I can't come up with one on the fly right now. So really, I was sitting there thinking of a company name, and I thought about some of the big ones. I thought about Google, and I thought about Apple, and I thought, well, what do they actually mean? They don't really mean anything, and I know there's meaning behind them and that sort of thing, but really, it's just a brand. Apple. When someone thinks of Apple, they don't actually think of an apple. They think of the Apple symbol. But what they really think about is the product and service that you get from that company. So it's purely a brand. Google's similar. So I just thought, oh, I'll make a word up. So I did.
Well, what do you mean that's not much of a story? That's the story. I made it up because the brand will become the name over time. The meaning rather of the brand gets associated as the brand becomes more known. And hopefully this is one of the small little steps that we're helping contribute to that journey for people to go, oh yeah, Quigley, that's who you go to your cybersecurity for. So that's the intention, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, hopefully it's a memorable thing. It's distinctive and hopefully memorable. But, look, I might work on some sort of a story involving being, chased by a lion through the African savannah. And it just came to me, this epiphany out of nowhere.
Mate, the lines in your life go way back to your student representation days at election times. That's where the lines existed in your life, which takes me to the questions around your career journey, because you've been a serial entrepreneur. You've created plenty of success over time with different businesses. So what would be some key highlights? Because the audience loves to know, well, how on earth did you end up in the position to create this business in the first place? But there's actually a story behind that.
Yeah. Look, a big part of my career has been focused on hiring people, and look, any person who's good in business is, hiring good people's been one of the most important things that they can do. So hiring people, supporting the creation of high functioning teams, and when I'm examining potential hires, I look at their career genesis, and sometimes it's the first role that tells me what I need to know. Sometimes it's the first 5. I'm always looking at their career journey as a story to inform me about who they are. And generally that's pretty accurate. There's some people that really deviate from that, but it's pretty rare. Now, in my case, my first role was as a 9-year-old doing a paper round in Glen Huntly Road, Elstonwick. A lot of kids of our generation, Gary, did that paper round. I don't think you do them now. I think a guy drives down the road and shoots them with a gun out the side, or even if there's newspapers. So I was delivering the Herald newspaper to the shop owners along Glen Huntly Road in the afternoon. Now, for those younger folk listening, it's not the Herald Sun. In the morning was the Sun, and in the afternoon was the Herald. Now they've merged, but I was delivering the Herald. And then I did the weekend papers, delivering them around the local area to the residents, riding along on my bike with 2 milk crates strapped to the front. And I remember more than once, the weight of the Saturday papers was so great compared to this skinny little 9 or 10-year-old that more than once I'd be riding my bike from the road to that sort of lip at the where you hit the driveway, and the front wheel with all the weight on it dug in, and I'll flip straight over. And I wasn't strong enough to right the bike with all the papers on it, so I'd have to tip the papers out and then load the thing up. It was an absolute disaster, and of course, often it was raining when that was happening.
Oh yeah.
So that was the early part, and then I got a gig working at Frank's Elstonwick Bakery on Saturday and Sunday mornings, which old Frank died only a few years ago, and the bakery's just shut down fairly recently. But yeah, so he gave me that opportunity, and I'd start work at 5 a.m. and work through to 11 or 12. So all of that was before I was a teenager. So I guess maybe that tells you that I don't mind hard work, and I enjoy the coin that comes from hard work.
Yeah.
Although, I think the coin I got from working at the bakery for more than 6 hours was, I think in the end, I got up to about $14 for that whole, not an hour, that was for the whole shift. And then while I was at uni, I became involved in technology, and I worked at a tech retailer, and then ended up running that business. That business is still around, actually. It's called Computers Now.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Quite a big business these days. And then, as you alluded to earlier, while I was at uni, I also became involved in the management aspect of the student union. And so I suppose I carried those two aspects forward, the management and the technology. And most elements of my career from that point on have involved those, most roles have involved those two elements. Starting up my own professional services business, which is dedicated to Apple technology and selling that, working as a consultant for a variety of AI and tech companies, to the business I own today, Quigley Cyber, with a focus on cybersecurity.
Yeah, I mean, I love there you go. We've known each other for a long time, but my first proper job was 6 mornings a week at 5 a.m. delivering newspapers. So I can very, very much remember those Saturday mornings with the bag. But you used to stick them on our back of the bike off our pack rack. We used to have them come off the back, so it managed to wait a little bit for that gutter, as you were discovering early. But I have to ask, were you able to ride and fold the paper with both hands, depending on which side? Were you able to deliver it without stopping? Because that was the thing. You knew you'd made it as a paper boy in the morning or a paper girl in the morning if you could actually be able to deliver the paper, get it into the various different sized letterboxes without stopping. So there's something. So there's some key points there. You said those early days, the bakery, the paper round, selling papers, because that was the other aspect with the Herald in the afternoon. You actually had to sell those papers, if I recall. It wasn't like you had to do that yourself. So you're actually learning as a 9-year-old how to sell, and literally cold selling too, by the way, because it's like, would you like a paper? Herald Sun, Herald, Herald, you want a Herald, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You don't even really see people, other than maybe the football with the people selling the records. Might be about the only similarity these days. But then, as you said, at the student union, you got yourself involved on your own time to get involved with the management side of the student union at Monash Caulford at Monsu. And then you were obviously studying the technology. At some point, then, so we were involved with Computer Now in the early days, and you said you ended up running that. What was there's a difference between being an employee to them becoming an entrepreneur. Tell us about that jump and that shift for you and how you went about that.
Yeah, good question. Look, I think for me, it felt quite natural, because even from a young age, as you said, I was selling papers, and I don't know why this was just part of me, but like I'd go to like there was a second-hand shop in the area, and I'd go and buy an old bike that I thought, was a bit undervalued, fix it up a bit, and then potentially sell it back to the same guy, actually. They have more than once. Yeah, so I can't actually tell you what it is that equipped me for that. It's not really in my family. But for whatever reason, I just realized that I enjoyed doing business, and I was okay at it.
Yeah, and obviously when you own it, you're in control of it too. You've got to make it work, and there's the pressure. And those early days of learning about hard work, and it's interesting. It seems to me that hard work's got a bad name in the 20. I'm not sure that that's actually healthy for us to see hard work as unhealthy.
Yeah, because there's been so much focus, and it's kind of a little bit past now, but on work-life balance, and now it's just called life balance, which I think is fair. Look, for me, it's about when I'm working, I'm focused and I'm working hard. It doesn't mean that I don't set aside time to go to my daughter's athletics or, help out at the school and the footy club and that sort of stuff. So for me, that's all part of the balance. But when I'm working and the hard work's required, I'm not afraid to do it.
Yeah, and that is whenever it is. If you got to do something on a weekend for work, you'll allocate the time and you'll do it, while equally being at the footy club or being at athletics or whatever the case may be. I know personally that you spend a lot of time and focus on your physical health and energy, which obviously helps with the balance from a mental health perspective as well, because I think the two definitely come together. And my book, Yes for Success, is all about your definition there of life balance. Is something we all determine what that is. It's not the same for everyone, but having an awareness of what it is means we can actually bring it to the surface. And, that you're regularly recruiting on LinkedIn. Some of those folk might be tuned in right now. There might be a few key points that they might have, if they've been smart, listened to about if they were to present themselves to you, Mark, about what they should be doing. And I think I heard when you said that you look through their resume, a lot of young folk devalue the part-time jobs they've had or the part-time volunteering that they've done, so much to the extent that they even exclude them from their resumes.
Yep.
Now, that would actually work against them if they had someone like you looking at them as a possible employee, because that would seem that stuff's actually important for you.
Yeah, definitely. And even, a lot of the people we deal with are, fairly advanced in their careers, and they'll be missing 5 or 10 years from the start of their career. You can read the CV and see that there's a 5-year gap between when they finished school or uni and the first job that's listed on their CV. Now, some of them might have been backpacking for 5 years. That would have been nice, but not many. So I'll always ask, all right, there's a gap here. What did you do? And they're like, oh, okay, that was a long time ago. A lot of them, COBOL programmers and things like that. Now, that's actually an important detail for some of the roles that we're looking at, even if they're a project manager or a program manager, knowing that they've got that technical background is actually really valuable.
And even though it's not that common now that people are, up to their eyeballs in COBOL or whatever the various languages might have been, that at the same time, as you say, that knowing that background means there's a certain level of knowingness that you get having played there for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you started your career doing that on the tools and you stayed in technology throughout your career, with not much deviation, you will have continued to build up that technical knowledge from that base. It's not to say that people that started in different fields can't do that, but for some roles, it's really valuable. And you do see now in cybersecurity, there's a massive undersupply of capability. So you've got people coming across from all sorts of previous careers, nursing and teaching and all sorts. And that diversity within the industry is actually really, really valuable.
For sure. As it always is when we get some diversity of opinion and experience on things. Now, from a business growth point of view, you start Quigley Cyber, but you've got to get customers right.
Yeah.
How'd you go about getting your first ones? How did that happen?
Real combination. So you put the word out to your network and people say, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, actually, yeah, you can give me a hand. And obviously they either know you personally or know you from working professionally probably a little bit of a blend if you've been working with them for a while. The sort of the professional and the personal friendships merge a bit. And yeah, so you start working with people that way. And then also, I'll say old school, but I suppose it is old school, digital marketing, just reaching out cold through LinkedIn. I can have some surprisingly positive outcomes, really quite extraordinary in some cases.
Yeah, so look, I mean, LinkedIn is by far my go-to social media platform, despite the fact I'm everywhere, but that is the one that always delivers over time, because that's where professional people are. The other thing about LinkedIn is it's, from a social media platform point of view, it's a very positive space. Like, you generally don't have haters on LinkedIn because everyone's identifiable, and why would someone want to be a hater on LinkedIn? Because that's only going to be bad for their reputation and their own brand. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, which makes it actually a good platform from that perspective. What are some of the best ways that people could reach out to contact you if they do either the small, medium, or large enterprise space want to get Quigley Cyber in to try and help them out and close some gaps on their cybersecurity, Mark?
Yeah, look, happy to engage with people across Australia. So I'm based in sunny today, Melbourne, we work across the whole country. mark.w@quigley.com.au. And then perhaps I think you've got show notes or something like that. I can put my LinkedIn profile, or you can just search Mark Williams Quigley and I'll pop up. And www.quigley.com.au.
No worries. Well, we will have all of those links in the show notes. So, Mark, I really want to thank you for your time, for coming on to the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast. I do have a last question for you, which is a question we commonly ask our guests on the show, and that is, what does moving beyond being good mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's just not accepting where you're at, continuing to push yourself beyond your comfort zone, having that open mind to investigate new opportunities. In my case, having worked a lot with emerging technology, I'm always challenging myself to understand what these new technologies are. And because I'm not a hardcore technology person, I've got a background in business, but I've always worked in technology, so I kind of fuse the two. And I'm always looking for the way that organizations can leverage these emerging technologies for their benefit. Now, in the case of cybersecurity, it's leveraging the technologies to protect your business from potential breaches and things like that. So for me, I'm constantly challenging myself. And I suppose that's moving me from beyond being good.
Thank you. And that constant challenging sort of also suggests that you're continually becoming what you need to become so that you're able to deliver for you personally and for your family, but also for your clients. Because if you sort of got stagnated and went, hey, I've got to this point in my career, I know as much as I need to know, but that willingness to keep challenging yourself, Mark, is such a consistent factor with successful people that I get to talk with. Like, it's like, don't, folks out there listening and watching us, don't just sit on your hands and wait for someone to tell you what you need to be doing. Like, you be the one driving your challenging of yourself, because having known you for, golly, over 3 decades now, I believe it is, I've got to, I've witnessed that along your journey. You're just someone that says, hey, and taking the opportunity to sell businesses when they get successful. And then it's like, okay, what's the next emerging technology space that I need to move in? I'm going to take my management and business experience and I'm going to lock it in with that new technology. Clearly, you've got to go learn a bit about that emerging technology at the same time, then see what the opportunities, and as you've done with Quigley Cyber, let's go.
Yep. No, I think well said, guys.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, Mark.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time. Cheers.
So, folks, make sure that you are subscribed, and please hit the notifications link for all of the videos and or on the podcast for the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast. We've got all the links for all the various books. For those of you watching this on YouTube, you can see it now up above for all the different books and bestsellers that I've had the good fortune that the market out there has taken to, and we've been able to get numerous bestsellers out there. So once again, thanks a lot for coming along to the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast. We look forward to seeing you or you listening to us next time. Bye.